Good evening, everybody. This is Dr. Mulder, and today I have with me two of my fantastic friends here. The first one is Mobius, which you all know, and for all the newbies here, we got in Rich, and Rich has an interesting past. He's worked for he's worked in can I say intelligence? That doesn't mean you're
Sure, you can.
intelligence. That doesn't mean you're intelligent, but you have worked in intelligence, right?
Well,
So.
the two might be an oxymoron, but that's okay.
Oh yeah, most of life is an oxymoron. But other than that, but yeah, what we're going to talk about today here is about this phenomena about with the government releasing all these wonderful details, saying that we are not alone and UFOs are coming around. And I'm always I'm always skeptical about anything that I hear in the news or anything that's coming out of government. And I think Rich probably knows that better than anybody. How the government operates. But with that being said, guys, let's get this show rolling here. I guess Mobius, do you want to go ahead and start and kind of lay down the path here for us?
Yeah, I think that throughout my investigations, going all the way back to the 1970s, the current, the one consistent thing that I found in all UFO data is deception. And I guess giving you an example, it's like NASA even recently said we have no UFO information. And the first things that we find in Disclosure Package 1 is the Apollo mission discussing lights behind them moving in and out of orbit, the Gemini mission, Secret Channel discussing UFO information. So obviously, NASA was not telling the truth. But we also, even in the disclosure itself, there's an eight-sided star. It's black, it's moving, but when you look at it, if you review the footage, I did 3 years of fact or faked. I was the forensic investigator, and this would have lasted about 1 second with me. This is a flare. You can see the parachute and you can see the smoke on it that is falling. So I don't know why it was put in that package, but it's not a UFO and it's easy to explain. But we're not going to tell you things you already know. By the end of the show, we're going to tell you things that you've never heard before. But I'm going to kick the can over to my friend Rich, and let's start talking about deception, UFOs, and let's look at this. Rich,
Well,
tag.
that's not a bad idea because I just so happened to have watched a documentary this past Sunday by a UFO researcher, Mark Pilkington, I think is his name, and he did this 2013 documentary film called I'm sure you've probably heard of it, Mirage Men. You've probably seen it,
Hmm.
and it's basically about how the U.S. military has used disinformation and psychological operations and counterintelligence tactics to actively shape and amplify all this UFO mythology over the decades, especially during the Cold War. And I mean, they really went out of their way with information operations to confuse things. Sometimes they would put a little bit of the truth in, whatever that is, we don't know. But basically, if you're expecting to get disclosure from someone in the military or especially the intelligence services, you know, that's just not going to work because um, counterintelligence basically means you're a trained professional liar. I mean, that doesn't mean they're a bad person; they're just good at their job. And anytime we're getting the UFO narrative or the UAP narrative from a government official, especially an intelligence officer, I don't believe a word of it.
Oh yeah. I mean, what's the old saying? Once a spook, always a spook. Is that the basically sort of the sort of the I don't know
Well,
the creed?
that's probably a fair assessment because some of these people that have come out, the ones that have had military or agency connections, it's like, hey, I'm a CI officer and I was abducted too. Yeah, sure, whatever,
Hmm.
and they're not going to be if they're still working for the government in some capacity as a contractor or something, and they've all signed, non-disclosure agreements on operations. So you're never going to get the truth from these people. In fact, we have this film coming out this summer. What's it called? Age of Disclosure.
Hmm. Yeah,
And
Steven Spielberg. Yeah.
Yep,
Mhm.
and he's worked with the agency for a long time with movies as well. So I'm not really expecting to be have anything really disclosed to me. If anything, I'm expecting more deception.
Okay, take that topic that you just said, and let me ask you, let us say that this is an op, that all you're being told about disclosure, and let's do this as past, present, and future. Talk about how an op would act. Let's say that one of the targets was religion, and let me tag not just one religion, but all religions. But most people, of course, that we're talking to would probably relate to the Bible more closely. So explain how that could be turned into an op with what is going on now, Rich.
For example, the government had an outreach program to evangelical pastors, you know, telling them to prepare their flocks to have their faith shaken, that anything about Christ, wasn't really true. Or even like maybe the Anunnaki genetically engineered us, so that the original biblical stories would instantly be cast into dispute because, hey, we're the product of alien intervention. So, but in order to pull that off, they would have to have a really good show to put on. And I think that would probably take the form of advanced tech that we don't know about. A lot of tech's been developed in secret over the decades with a black budget that's in the billions and the billions of dollars. All of the expertise that went in to help do that. And we're not privileged to any of it. So probably if the average citizen saw anything advanced like Skunkworks has, for example, it would probably blow their socks off. And I
Yeah.
would suspect that with lasers and the holograms and drone technology, they would be able to put on a really good show. I don't know what form it would take, but it's definitely possible. And the one last, the really important thing before I forget is von Braun told his secretary, Carol Rosen, before he died, he says, he said, remember, Carol, he says, the last card they're going to play is the alien card, and that they say we're going to have to build a space-based defense system to protect ourselves, and all of it will be a lie. That's Werner von Braun.
Oh yeah. I've heard stories about him. About some of the things that were going on. You know, I know that we got it. I mean, I've even mentioned this on the show with Mobius about over at Fort Bragg. I guess it's back around 1993 or whatever. I saw a craft that was like over 300 feet long, or about the size of a football field, completely silent and hovering about 150 feet above the ground. And this thing's right next to a major military base, and you don't have any Apache helicopters scrambling this thing or anything. Yeah, that tells me it's one of ours.
Yeah. And what about the drone flap, like from a couple years ago now in December? Um, and nobody in the government knows what it is, and yet it's showing up over military bases, and they're not being challenged. So something's going on. There's an operation, and also the other thing is data analytics. They're analyzing. So whenever these things happen, everybody goes on social media and they talk about it, and a perception of what's going on gets generated in the public mind. And our friends in government sit there and they go through through all these data streams, and they can actually figure out how to tweak the narrative, and they're out there data mining everything that we say, to manipulate us further. I mean, it's not a conspiracy theory, it's just what governments do. And for any government, I mean, the worst enemy is not somebody outside the country. The worst enemy of any government is it's perceived as being its own people.
Mhm.
Well, back, you're talking about the 2024 UFO flap or UAP
Yep.
flap.
Yep.
And one of the interesting things that happened, most people assume by what the media said that this was like relegated to New Jersey and New York, but it was all over the US. In Washington State, the sheriff there with his own drone, very large drone, chased one of these craft, and he chased it so far out into the ocean that it was the point of no return. He was like 400 miles out. He had to bring his drone back, or else he would have lost, energy, and it would have crashed into the ocean. So these things were all over the US. They were tangible. They were seen over the White House. The official story was that this was some type of FAA testing. But I promise you that the FAA was not testing thousands of drones all over the US for no reason. And there's a wild card to this. During the test, a potential shoot down was reported in New Jersey. I believe it was a civilian. He said, I got one of them. I don't think it was ever recovered. But this is important. All over the state of New Jersey, New York, DC, all in that area was for 3 days very high radiation levels. Some areas up to 1,000 CPM and all over about 450 CPM. The news media simply did not report that there was radiation in the area for 3 days, and it was reading in DC. Very strange. The entire thing was inherently deceptive, and we never got an explanation that makes sense. Now that you talked about that, the last time deja vu that we saw a UFO over the White House, which seems to happen more often than not, was 1952. We had the same exact thing happen. This was a little more detailed. Do you want to pitch the story or do you want me to? How about you?
Go ahead and pitch. Oh, go ahead and pitch it. I've got something else to interject here later on, but you go ahead and do the part about the 52 flap if you'd like.
Okay. Well, there were multiple fleets of UFOs seen all during July, but especially July 31st, so much so that Captain S.C. Pierman was sent up in a fighter aircraft to intercept the objects over the White House. And he definitely said, I have a lock. Do I have permission to fire at one point? No permission was given to the scrambled jets. But the objects, they were moving about 7,000 miles an hour, and they started teasing the fighter jets. They would be in front of them, beside them. They would loop the jets. They would go out, hundreds of miles, come back in, and just started teasing the jets. They simply said, the actual jet fighter, that we are dealing with some type of technology, physical craft, and that they seem to be thousands of years more advanced than whatever we are flying. So that is radar, that's visual, and that is the fighter jets all reporting a physical sighting in the sky. I think now we would probably say that they were UAPs, they were as big as cars, they were whatever. But this is not the first time in 2024 that we had such a flap, especially objects over the White House. So no, it's happened twice and nobody's connected the dots.
Yep. Back in the day, back in 52, this senior controller, I was just looking it up, Harry Barnes and others confirmed they were hard targets on multiple radars, including the control tower, and they also were reports of visual bright lights accelerating like at incredible speeds. So, and these were F-94 interceptors at the time that had scrambled out of Newcastle Air Force Base in Delaware. And these things just vanished off the radar as the jets arrived, but they reappeared when the jets departed. So something happened, but it was never explained. The only thing that came out later was they said perhaps it's a temperature inversion, kind of like the northern version of swamp gas.
Yeah.
Right. We had the actual interceptor pilots reporting visual contact, and the objects would move beside them, loop the plane, look at them from both sides, shoot out hundreds of miles at 7,000 miles per hour, virtually instantly, come back, and basically tease the plane over the White House. All the pilots, of course, were sworn to secrecy. And what we're telling you now, these are deathbed confessions. The pilots said that people need to know that we experienced physical craft over the White House. So, Rich, you nailed the details. That's 100% correct. And I wouldn't, I know that your math, so you're bringing in the receipts. This is an ongoing saga, and no, we're not being told the truth about it, and we weren't even told the truth in 2024.
Yeah,
no, it seems like a lot of this technology seems to go back to the post-World War II era or before with the Nazi tech. Like with the Bell. Der Glock, was that what it was called? And
yep.
All these guys were brought over here in Operation Paperclip when the Nazis were sort of their resumes were cleaned up and they were brought to the U.S. and went to work here. And von Braun was one of them. I think in his case, he was more of a rocket scientist than a Nazi. He was just working wherever the money was to get his pet project into space. So he pointed out that they brought this exotic propulsion and aerospace knowledge into NASA, the U.S. back in the day, but the Der Glock, maybe you want to speak to that.
Okay, this matches the statement that keeps coming out of the Pentagon that the United States has time, space technology, that we can travel infinite distances, infinite time, and that we can control these things. Uh, the Das Glock experiment was spinning plasmas made out of mercury in opposite directions, and it caused time, space, and gravity distortions. Now, in the initial experiments, it killed everybody around it. A very bright blue, purple plasma would envelop the device. But if we go back and we look, all during the war, we had Foo Fighters that were coming to the American fighters, the craft, the bombers, and their generators would fail, the onboard electronics would go bonkers. And so there was some type of high-tech, high-yield device that was causing interference. And virtually this has been wiped off the map. But I think maybe even more secret than the atomic bomb is the plasma physics that we keep hearing about that causes, I hate to use the word anti-gravity because that's not accurate, but anti-gravity effects and the technology in time space. And it seems to have, when near people, a very, very strange effect on people who are just outside the immediate proximity, of which I consider you an expert on the effects of time space type plasma technologies. Go ahead.
Well, there's a guy out there on YouTube. He's been around for well over 10 years. Dark journalist Daniel List is his name. He coined this term apotheum to describe the reality distortion physics that's often associated with encounters with these things, where people have timeline shifts and blackouts and consciousness reality manipulations. And the term he came up with was apotheum. So people, when they have these effects, they seem to stick with them. They'll start having like psychic experiences, and for some people, it could just send them over the edge.
Oh yeah.
That seems to be one of the side effects. So, initially everybody near the experiment supposedly in Nazi Germany died. And so they were later done in a cave with the bell. And this may be one of the most top secret things that are now yielding reverse technology and the craft we're seeing. But the amount of money that it would have cost to put thousands of these UAPs, as they're now called, all over the US for some like FA experiment. And I guarantee you, there's no way you would get permission to put 3 over the White House in 2024, which I watched myself on the White House cam and thought it was the strangest thing that I've ever seen in my life. To think that, these are not being engaged. But here's a wild card. This is not simply happening in the United States. It's not happening only in January 24. It's happening everywhere. Militaries all over the United States are reporting engaging over the military bases, but all over the world, all over Europe, the EU is having these odd craft that cannot be locked on with radar, that have no heat signatures, that behave size of a car, that behave very abnormally, and they don't leave, they simply fade into non-existence. They can't be engaged with missile systems. This is happening also in places like Ukraine, which they're very silent on, but it just happened 3 nights ago in Russia. They had a giant craft over a military base. They could not lock onto it. It was bigger than a car, and it had the classic plasma-like appearance and behavior. And it simply just would jump around over the military base and disappear. The question is now, if these are happening all over the world, these are now UAPs, exactly why? What is to gain and who is doing it? And the story is much bigger. Nobody's connected the dots. It's not the Russians simply doing it. It's not the United States doing it. It's not any one nation doing it. If anything, and it's human technology, it's something way bigger than we can imagine. And the question is, why? What would be the payoff?
And it's something beyond governments too that are running it, because it's beyond a government like in Washington or in London. It seems to be supranational in origin. It's almost like there's a government above the government, and that's being talked about more and more all the time.
Right. It's happening in China. They've had multiple times that they've engaged with UAPs over military bases. And I thought it was the strangest thing when these started appearing all over the EU that they were saying these were Russian, like drones. No, the Russians do not have a technology that cannot be shot down, that can just appear and float over your military base. And every known, technology to destroy these do not work and they cannot be engaged. They jump around, they appear all around. This is something completely different than we've ever, normally encountered. And it's not a technology that any one country has. It's bigger, and no one's telling the truth about what is going on. And whether it's an alien technology or a human technology, at this point, I don't think it's possible to tell. But what we're kind of suggesting here is military something larger than one country easily could be part of what we call disclosure. But it's something that is unimaginable. It's simply not any one country. It would be to the advantage of all of the countries. And the ability to affect every person on earth and even imprison those people is enormous. It's terrifying what this potentially could encompass.
Oh
It
yeah.
is. It's like there's a breakaway civilization or some deep aerospace cabal that's rooted in imported Nazi tech and even Antarctic secrets. You know, they seize control of transformative UFO derived knowledge. Like there was a group called X Protect that Daniel Litz, the dark journalist, talks about all the time, and their goal primarily is to confuse, obfuscate, and if necessary, remove anybody who gets close to bringing the truth of whatever is going on out. And not that any one person has any idea that we know of, but it's called X Protect. And these are the guys that are, for example, during the before the Kennedy assassination, he was rewriting and he was writing an executive order to smash the CIA, and he was going to actually share UFO data with the Soviets. And I think there's no way he would have been allowed to do that. Apparently, he had like backdoor communications with the Soviets, not because he was a traitor, but because he and Khrushchev apparently were trying to defuse the whole nuclear threat. And Kennedy thought that by bringing the UFO file into the mix and exploring space together, that would change the whole course of the world to a more peaceful and better place. And of course, as we know, that didn't happen. He was going to give a speech in Texas about that very topic, and he was killed, as we know, in the broad daylight in that motorcade. But a lot of things tie into this, and the Kennedy assassination is one of them.
Yeah. I mean, heck, even Jimmy Carter was bringing this subject up along with Ronald Reagan. I think he was giving a speech before Congress about this very same thing. About what if we knew that we were under threat, from something from space, the entire world would unite and all this other good stuff. Uh, and I'm going to be honest with all the crap I've seen here, guys. I'm skeptical. I mean, even me, I'm skeptical. I will look into something and be open-minded about it, but I do have my questions, and I will verify the proof that somebody is giving for a particular subject. I mean, for example, Mobius and I were doing something about quantum mechanics the other week, and we realized at the end of the day that we're living in a video game. Okay, everything around us is just basically an illusion. And that's my premise with everything. I think this is just part of the video game. It's bringing entertainment to the masses. And also I think it is a psychological operation. And if it is a psychological operation, what is the end game? What are they trying to accomplish? what are they trying to, which direction are they trying to steer the general public with this? Are they trying to make us believers or make us think, oh, there goes the government again lying to us one more time?
I think they're trying to break the American psyche, is what I think. I think worldwide as well. I think it's to get people so anxious and so wound up that they'll be compliant to whatever it is that's being planned to roll out and to go along with it because it's going to be perceived as the only thing that's going to save them. So I don't, I'm not predicting the future, but it just sure looks like all of this is headed somewhere, and it looks like it's headed somewhere that's not for our best interests.
Yeah. Well, like as I mentioned earlier, when you see a 300-foot long craft that is in desert camo beige, like from Desert Storm days back in the early 90s, and has a military insignia on the back of it, yeah, it makes you wonder. It makes you wonder. I have to admit that, hey, is all this crap we're seeing, is this the little green men, quote unquote, or is this us? I tend to steer toward the direction of it being us.
I will give you a wild card so that, something I've never heard for something for each one of you to go and do. And I think it will blow your mind when you step way back and you do godlike mode and you look at the history of UFO photographs. And I'm not talking about old photos where somebody threw a hubcap up in the air and took a picture of it. There's some really good cases that are well documented for the last, well, what, almost 100 and something years. Look at the photos, look at each one, and try to imagine how much the technology looks more in the future at the time than what you're seeing. And the trick is that you're going to come to is that over even the last 120 years that we have photos, they've always been about 30 years ahead of what we would consider state of the art technology, maybe 40, but never extremely advanced. So if we had some society coming across time, space, dimension to Earth, they would be thousands and thousands of years, maybe tens of thousands more advanced, not always 30 to 40 years past what we would consider state of the art. And it's right there in the photos. And that's what I'm talking about when I say deception. It just doesn't make sense. The contacts don't make sense. The behavior doesn't make sense. Leaving, like lines in the cornfield, doing your travels and then going back home. It doesn't make sense. The message that people are given are always something akin to, the nukes are going to destroy the world. You need to tell everybody to make peace. You need to change your ways or mankind's time is doomed. Okay.
That sounds like the movie The Earth, the Day the Earth Stood Still.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that, by the way, was run by that was a military intelligence guy that was involved in part of that filming too.
But nothing tangible. No, no technology ever is directly given to the people. No proof, nothing of what they've experienced. The closest that I could say that we may have seeding that took place that I'm aware of would be the Roswell crash. And after Roswell, we suddenly did have, immediately we transferred from tube type technology to solid state to CPUs to fiber optics. All of these things came very fast. And I know someone very close to me that basically said that he was given a transistor at the AT&T labs very early and told that it came from Germany at the time. It was a made product that it was not something they fabricated, and they were asked to find uses for it and build it into American technology. I have no reason to, this was a deathbed confession from a very high ranking engineer. I have no reason to doubt he told me the truth about everything.
Mhm.
People tend not to tell lies on their deathbed, but it's still very complicated. And if you look at the Roswell books and Corso's books, there's one interesting thing that was missed in there. It talks about the laser scalpel that he had, and it talks about it throughout the book that he would shine it on the wall and burn the wall. But it never once talks about the power source. And I would just like to know the power source inside of a high output laser that would last 20 years of use and not go bad. And so there are little things, if you deep dive as an engineer, that you find they're always inconsistent within everything. I would say it's true of Roswell too. You always, like I say, you always find deception. You can't find an absolute truth. So I don't know. I see no evidence that Germany had solid state technology and fiber optics, but certainly after this, we certainly did. And exponentially, our technologies advanced to the point that we now have quantum computers that potentially that we're dealing with multiple universes. So within 100 years, we've really jumped technology, in an unimaginable way. So, something is going on, but I'm not
Since World
quite.
War II, it's skyrocketed. I mean, you look at where we are with computer technology today, and you look at what passed for computers back in the 50s. It's unrecognizable. It's like we may as well have alien technology. That's what it feels like.
Yeah,
I
it
agree.
was. Yeah, I mean, if you look at the computers back during World War II, they look like more like machines, like physical machines with gears.
It
Hang
would
on
take
one.
up a whole building.
Oh yeah, exactly. So it's just incredible. Well, guys, we're about ready to wind down on the first 30 minutes of the show. I like to try to put this in 30-minute blocks for the audience, so it's easy for them to kind of digest this. What do you say we take a, quick break here and then come back on in about 3 minutes? Will that work for you guys?
Sure.
All
Yeah.
right. Okay, fantastic. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back with you in just one moment. Thank you. And guys, just use the invite that I sent you. And I'll be up here in about 3 minutes. All right,
Okay.
bye. Bye.